All right, good afternoon and welcome to our third and final session of our financial education series. I'm Stephanie Wetzel with the EWU Office of Alumni Relations, and today we have a wonderful EAG joining us, Aileen Cowan-Vokes, a career advisor with the EWU Career Center and a 2013 alum. Good afternoon, Aileen, how are you?
I'm doing really well, how are you?
We're doing great. I can't believe it's Wednesday already, holy cannoli.
Cruising. A hot Wednesday.
It is. Well, I really hope that you're staying healthy and safe during these past few months of uncertainty. And we so appreciate you joining us today to discuss salary negotiations. Our salaries play a huge role in our financial decision independence. So I'm really going to explore this topic with you today.
Yeah,
and we really had to. I know, and I was like so excited. This is our third and final one. We've had some really great conversations so far in this virtual financial education series. We started with budgeting 101 to credit and debt prioritization, and we're excited to close on this series with a topic that will really nicely transition us from our financial education series into our August series on career support. So to kick us off today, I have a question for you.
Yeah. Shoot.
All right. So the most common time people are thinking about negotiating their salaries is when we're very first hired on by a company or even starting that interview process. I have a question as far as when should people start that conversation typically in the hiring process?
Well, that's an excellent question. And I think it's important to kind of define first, like what it means to start, because a lot of people have this vision that like you start having that conversation in the interview, maybe at the end, when they ask you to ask questions of them. But the way that we envision it at the Career Center is sort of a two-pronged approach. Firstly, you should be doing some background research on potentially what this job could offer you in terms of its salary and the worth you bring to that particular role. So you already have kind of a sense of what is appropriate for this particular position. And maybe we'll get into how to do some research later on in today's conversation. But one thing I always like to tell students that I'm advising is you really don't want to have a conversation with that future employer until they've given you an offer. Because if you bring up, midway through, like, hey, how much does this job pay? Or I'm really looking to earn $70,000 a year, and you don't even have the offer, that's not going to read very well in terms of your own professionalism. Because really, you want to make sure that you're emphasizing your commitment to the position, your interest in it, and your skill sets and how you will benefit that company and vice versa before you even talk about the money side of things. So yeah, it's mostly when the offer is actually on the table.
Absolutely. No, I really appreciate that. Those are, it can be a very intimidating topic, and I feel very strongly that it's definitely one that needs to be prepared for. And so I really appreciate that insight into like the two-prong approach that you guys at the Career Center really push and educate on. And so out of curiosity, what are some strategies for doing that research and comparing salaries so that you can be prepared during that negotiation process once an offer is on the table?
Absolutely. So essentially, I would encourage you to make an appointment with the Career Center first and foremost, because we are the experts in helping people do that research. And if you are trying to tackle this really complicated subject all on your own, you can get kind of lost in the weeds quickly. So definitely reach out and talk to people who do this for a living and who are really invested and interested in your success. Because we don't work for those companies that you're potentially applying to. Essentially, we work for you. So make contact with us. Another major component of the research is to get a sense of what the industry trends are. So there is no one size fit all in terms of how much one type of position will pay. You may be in an industry where demand is growing, and so you have greater leverage in the negotiation process. or you may be in a marketplace where there are tons of people competing for the same jobs and your leverage is not as strong.
Yeah.
So you really want to make sure that you're researching the industry trends, looking at typical association websites, professional association websites for your industry. You can also use job searching sites like Glassdoor that have typical salary sort of like stipulations associated with jobs that you're applying for.
Right.
We also at the Career Center have very specific salary calculation sites that we use that take into account cost of living, because that's another factor that not everyone thinks about when they are negotiating their salary. So for instance, if you're applying to be, say, a user design engineer over in Seattle,
Right.
well, you might need to ask for more money in that process than if you are applying for the same position here in Spokane. Because cost of living is, well, as we all know, like really, really important to making sure that you can pay all of those bills. And some places are just really, really expensive to live in. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with choosing to live in an expensive city, but you do need to be prepared to advocate for yourself to be able to live comfortably and well in that.
Certainly. And it's kind of funny you brought up the Glassdoor website, because that was definitely going to be my next question, is kind of what are some, sites that people can rely on to have clearly accurate information, but also you always wonder, where are they getting that from? Do you have any insight into if they're polling companies in the area or how that goes about and working?
Yeah, so I don't want to speak out of pocket, because I don't know all of the insides and outsides of how they compile those metrics. I do know that sites like Glassdoor and LinkedIn, they are liaisons between job seekers and companies that are interested in finding those candidates. And so it's to their interest to have information that works for both of those groups. And so, yeah, they will aggregate, different kinds of job salaries and display that information so that job seekers are, so that job seekers know clearly what they're getting into. Another website that we use often is, I want to make sure that I'm getting this right. It's the occupational, it's the Bureau of Labor Statistics Occupational Handbook. That's a mouthful, but we do have that linked on our website. And that's a really great resource because it just draws from really neutral data that the government compiles to tell you what kind of average starting salary your position in your industry starts out at. It has a median salary as well, and it can show you also that cost of living and where those jobs are rapidly flourishing or maybe where they're going away. So that's another key website. And I also want to mention too, because earlier I said it's important to make a contact with your career center in order for us to help you. But I want to reiterate that this isn't open just to currently enrolled students. Anyone who has graduated from Eastern Washington University has access to the Career Center.
Awesome.
For as long as they want. For free.
I love that. I love that. It's a resource that keeps on giving. So
that's right.
Well, thank you so much for those tips. I honestly just want to reiterate, it sounds like research is the way to go in prepping for looking at comparable salaries and getting ready for that conversation. And oftentimes research can aid in creating that foundation. And so there oftentimes can be mistakes too. And so I was curious if you could share some common mistakes that people might be making during this negotiating process.
Absolutely. So I think a few common mistakes people make is thinking that they can negotiate once they've actually accepted an offer at a lower number. You have to be really mindful about the kinds of communication declarations you're making in this process. So if you're like, yeah, I'll take that job at $30,000, and then you do some research and you realize, oh no, most of the people in this position, in this area, in this industry are making close to $45,000, $50,000.
My goodness, yeah.
you've kind of boxed yourself into a corner if you've accepted something, without doing that research.
Right.
Another common mistake that we see is people making those salary negotiation overtures after a company has said, this is our best offer.
Right.
Sometimes a company may be playing hardball with you and trying to trick you out of more or less money. But honestly, if they're saying that this is it, like we really like you as a candidate, this is our top offer, then that's what you're going to get. I work with education students a lot, and people who work for governmental institutions, state institutions, there's often pay scales involved.
Right.
And there may be a little bit of wiggle room for sure in that process. But if the pay scale has, a range of like just a couple of $1,000s, and you're like, I'm going to ask for $10,000 above that,
Right.
you're going to look like someone who's uninformed about the industry that they're stepping into, which again will sort of harm your professionalism. And then lastly, I would say another common mistake is when people don't really have the justification to back up the offer that they're asking. So asking for. So maybe, they've done some research and they realize cost of living usually accounts for X amount of money, and most people in that position account for $40,000, and then you ask for $50,000 because of cost of living. It's like, well, that's not a justification. Or if you can't actually demonstrate, say they give you an offer and you think that your value as an employee is worth more than that, but you're not able to articulate why. You're not able to say, like, I have certificates in X, Y, and Z subjects, or I actually have this really specific experience that will put me above and beyond these other candidates. If you can't actually justify that, then your future employer is going to say, I understand why you're asking, but also we can't give you that offer.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Well, those are really great tangible takeaways on common mistakes, but also knowing, again, your research. And so I appreciate that tidbit. And so I think those mistakes often help us grow, and we learn from them, as if we do with job interviews, and always just becoming more comfortable with that conversation and the salary negotiation standpoint. And so practice does make perfect, right? And so
right.
I just, out of curiosity, can you share any common fears people might be having when they negotiate their salary?
Absolutely. So some people are afraid essentially that negotiation actually won't work. That, it doesn't, like, they almost give up before they even start. And they're just like, oh, why would I ask for more money? This is the offer they're giving us.
Right.
I know other people negotiate, but it's not for me. Well, you've maybe talked yourself out of a difference of $5,000, which is the average amount of money that a person can earn if they actually negotiate for themselves. And $5,000, in my world, that can go some places. I wouldn't mind having an extra $5,000 in my pocket every year.
Absolutely.
Another fear that people have is that they think that they'll look like they're demanding to their employer, that they're being pushy in some way. But this is business. And this is something that I really emphasize over and over and over again to people who step into my office or into my virtual advising session. Your emotions are valid, and certainly these kind of procedures and experiences can bring up a lot of emotions for us.
Right.
But if you can quell that, if you can think about making this fairly impersonal and just think, you know what, my future employer isn't making this a personal attack or, against me for not offering negotiation. The reverse is true. You're not attacking them or being pushy or being inappropriate by having that conversation toward the end of the interview process if you are offered the position. So I often say with students, like, there's kind of a range of confidence for people. People often feel like they're imposters in these experiences. And very, very rarely do I meet a student who's just like wildly overconfident. They're just like, I'm the best ever. I deserve $1 million. So I always encourage people to dial up the confidence just a little bit and think of themselves as worthy of stepping into that experience and advocating for themselves in that way. And it's not going to be seen as pushy. It's going to be seen as professional. That's what the expectation is. I would say one other kind of fear that people have is that just in general, asking for money is inappropriate. And I think that comes from a cultural stigma around not talking about money.
Right.
And it's seen as like sort of taboo. Like you don't talk about politics, you don't talk about religion, and you don't talk about money. That only benefits people who are in positions of power, and who often control the money side of things. And again, this is just a feature of finding gainful employment. As long as we are operating under this particular system, then it's important to be informed and sort of dismantle that thought process around it being just like wildly taboo or inappropriate to talk about money in the first place.
Yeah.
And that's something, again, that the Career Center can help you with, because we don't mind talking about it. We like talking about it. And we will model that sort of comfort for anyone who maybe is feeling a little bit unsure about how to have those conversations.
Yeah, certainly. I would almost say hearing the word no could be fearful as well for a lot of people. And so they might be reserving themselves like, oh, I'm afraid I'll say no. And that might leave a really poor.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And rejection is a huge part of the job applying process.
Yeah.
And so, again, it's really important to start practicing that distance between yourself, like your inner self, like the inner self that feels feelings, and what this process is all about. Because the process doesn't really care about the inner self. It's I like to tell people you kind of have to be a robot. It's a little bit where it's just like beep boop beep boop. I'm applying for a job. And understand that, like, if somebody says no, an appropriate response back is, okay, thanks for considering the offer. Or thanks for hearing me out. And that's all you need to really have in terms of an emotional response, or one that's visible. You can feel whatever you need to feel inside. But if somebody tells you no, it's all good. Because you might find that the next offer is going to give you exactly what you want. And again, just to reiterate, this is not personal. It's just business.
Yep. Absolutely. Well, and perspective, right? Like you were saying, you got to have that perspective. You're in the zone, you're applying for jobs. And I think that's a really great segue into my next question for you is, how do employers typically broach this salary negotiating?
Yeah, well, from a wide variety of angles, honestly. Some employers will ask right out of the gate, so what were you hoping to make at this position? And when we hear that at the Career Center, before like an interview has really even started, we kind of take a pause and we're like, well, why would they ask that? Is it because they want to know what your lowest starting entry fee is? Because that doesn't really benefit you, does it? So you might want to counter offer with a range that is higher than you would normally ask for, because you can always negotiate down. Hard to start at the middle and negotiate up. Some employers will, again, like especially if they have pay scales built into their positions, will be able to say in the job listing, here's the range that we're expected to offer. And you may be able to have a conversation toward the end after an offer is given to tweak that a little bit. But again, you go in knowing what your general range is. But then again, a lot of employers will wait until an offer is on the table. You don't have to say yes right away. That's something that I really like to emphasize with students. You can get an offer. They'll call you on the phone. They'll email you. You're allowed to say, oh, I am so grateful for this opportunity. Thank you so much. This is awesome. Can I have 1 to 2 business days to consider this? And that's when you go do some additional research, or you contact us. and we continue to have a conversation about what is appropriate for your response to their offer.
Yeah, absolutely. I love those. And it's so true. Taking that time to say, I appreciate it, and then doing the research then rather than right away, like saying yay or without thinking about it, having your negotiation conversation not prepared. So.
Yeah, well, I think it's really, really essential that you maintain your level of professionalism and authenticity throughout the entire process. Because if you have sort of a surly attitude at this juncture, what's an employer going to think as you are, as they're onboarding you or considering hiring you? They're like, ooh, this actually turned into a difficult situation, and you haven't even started the job. You're setting them up to have a particular impression of you as you're working for their company. And so even in the negotiation process, it's important to approach this with a level of assurance and confidence, but also kindness as well. That's because, I think we have this image of like, I'm going to negotiate, and this means I'm going to play hardball. And again, that's like you're representing yourself with a particular kind of attitude. So a former colleague of mine would often say, when you're wanting to negotiate with a company, you present an offer that is more than what they offered you initially, and then say, how can we meet somewhere in the middle? Or how can we get this done so that we're both benefiting from this experience? Acknowledging that this is a two-way street for both of you.
Absolutely. Well, my goodness, this time is just flowing by today on our conversation. So I'm going to skip ahead to one of my last questions for you. I was just curious on any other thoughts that you'd like to share before we close today.
Yeah, I mean, I would say overall, these conversations, these topics, we can, have an exchange that lasts like a half hour, but there's skills that require repeated practice and repeated research and information and conversation. And so truly your best bet, if you're interested in being successful in your professional life, is to reach out to the people who are designed by their own professional lives to help you be successful. And so at the Career Center, we really take you from the beginning to the end of a professional journey, whether it be, oh, I don't even know what I want to do for a living, or what's my major going to be? I don't know. Through the cultivation of skills, through experiential learning, getting an internship, learning how to search and apply for jobs, creating documents like resumes and cover letters, as well as learning how to interview. Like, these are all really challenging skills that people don't pick up just kind of from the ether, right? Like, we're not born knowing these rules. They are kind of hidden rules, to be honest. Like, I always describe it. It's like someone told you to play Monopoly, but they didn't tell you how to play the game. It's like, that would be a very confusing experience. And so we are rule decoders. We are people who can help you through that process, all the way through the salary negotiation side of things. So we really look forward to meeting with and working with current students and alumni wherever they are in their professional journeys.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Aileen. This has been wonderful and super, super informative. I just can't thank you enough for joining us today. All of the tangible resources and tips you shared, the websites, it's been fantastic. So for those who are watching today, I really want to thank you and hope that you can join us on Wednesday, August 12th at noon, Pacific Standard Time, of course, for a part 1 of our career support series. So make sure to check it out at ewu.edu/money matters after the end of this financial series. It's a great free resource for all of our friends and our community. And you can find a plethora of resources and financial education tutorials. So join us August 12th with Jenica Jett, also from the EWU Career Center, who will be kicking us off in the next series to discuss jobs in this new world. So stay in touch with EWU Alumni Association online, ewu.edu/alumni, where you'll find information on our upcoming events like Silverwood next Friday, August 7th, and of course, our Eagle Flights Wine Club. Have a great rest of your day, Eeks.
Thank you.